It all started with a fence. Not just any fence, mind you, but a sturdy, 6-foot wooden barrier that ran along the back of my property in the quaint suburban neighborhood of Willow Creek. This wasn't some decorative picket fence meant to keep up appearances. It was a wildlife barrier, carefully designed and approved by the county to protect a small nature reserve bordering our community. The reserve was home to a delicate ecosystem, think nesting birds, scampering rabbits, and even the occasional deer. The fence ensured that the wildlife stayed safe from stray pets and nosy humans, while also keeping our neighborhood free from wandering critters. It was a win-win, or so I thought. My name's Alex Harper, and I'd lived in Willow Creek for about 3 years. It's one of those places where every house looks like it was cut from the same catalog. Neatly manicured lawns, cookie-cutter mailboxes, and a homeowners association, HOA, that ruled with an iron fist wrapped in a velvet glove. I'd never been a fan of HOAs, but this one seemed tolerable when I moved in. The rules were strict: grass couldn't be taller than 3 inches. No unapproved paint colors. No parking boats in driveways, but they kept the neighborhood looking pristine, and I didn't mind too much. That is, until Karen Mitchell moved. In Next Door, Karen was the textbook definition of an HOA stereotype. Middle-aged, impeccably dressed, with a perm that screamed, "I want to speak to your manager." She took her role as HOA vice president like it was a divine calling. She'd walk the neighborhood with a clipboard, jotting down notes about minor infractions, a mailbox that was slightly tilted, a shrub that wasn't trimmed to regulation height, or a car parked an inch too close to the curb. Most people just rolled their eyes and complied, but I'd heard whispers at the community barbecue about her overzealous enforcement. "She's got too much time on her hands," my neighbor Tom muttered over a burger. "Wait till she sets her sights on you." I didn't think much of it at the time. My property was in order, and the wildlife barrier fence had been there when I bought the house. It was grandfathered into the HOA bylaws, approved by both the association and the county's environmental department due to the nature reserve. The fence was plain but functional, made of treated cedar with a gate for maintenance access. It blended into the landscape, and I'd never had a single complaint about it. That is, until Karen decided it was her personal mission to improve the neighborhood. It was a sunny Saturday morning when I first noticed something was off. I was sipping coffee on my back porch when I heard the unmistakable sound of a power saw. At first I thought someone was doing yard work nearby, but the noise was too close, way too close. I stepped outside and saw Karen standing in my backyard, directing a contractor who was sawing through my fence like it was a piece of cardboard. The cedar planks were already in splinters on the ground, and a section of the fence was completely gone, exposing the nature reserve beyond. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted, storming across the lawn. My heart was pounding, not just from anger, but from the realization that the gap in the fence could let wildlife wander into the neighborhood, or worse, let neighborhood dogs into the reserve. Karen turned to me with that smug, self-righteous smile she always wore at HOA meetings. "Oh, Alex, good morning. I'm just taking care of this eyesore. The board agreed it doesn't meet community standards." "Community standards?" I sputtered. "This is a wildlife barrier. It's not some random fence you can just tear down. It's approved by the county." She waved a hand dismissively, her clipboard tucked under her arm. "The HOA bylaws state that all fences must be uniform in style and height. This one's too tall, and frankly, it's ugly. I sent you a notice last week." I stared at her, dumbfounded. "A notice? I never got any notice." "Well, it was mailed," she said, as if that settled everything. "You should check your mailbox more often." The contractor, a burly guy with a buzzcut, paused his saw and looked uncomfortably between us. Ma'am, should I keep going?" he asked Karen. "No, you stop right now," I snapped, stepping between him and the fence. "This is my property and you're trespassing. Get off my land." Karen's smile didn't falter, but her eyes narrowed. "Alex, let's not make a scene. The HOA has the authority to enforce aesthetic guidelines. If you don't like it, you can file an appeal at the next meeting." I was livid, but I knew arguing with her was like arguing with A brick wall. I pulled out my phone and started snapping pictures of the damage. "You're going to regret this, Karen," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This isn't just an HOA violation, it's illegal." She scoffed and walked away, her heels clicking on the pavement as the contractor packed up his tools. Clearly eager to get out of the crossfire, I stood there, staring at the gaping hole in my fence, my mind racing. The nature reserve was now exposed, and I could already imagine the chaos: dogs chasing rabbits, kids wandering into the woods, or worse, protected species getting hurt. I had to act fast. First, I called the county's environmental department. The woman on the phone, a no-nonsense type named Linda, was horrified when I explained what happened. "That fence is part of a legally mandated wildlife corridor," she said. "Tampering with it without permission is a violation of county regulations. I'll send someone out to assess the damage, and you should file a police report for vandalism." Next, I called the police. A patrol car arrived within the hour, and I showed the officer, a guy named Officer Daniels, the splintered wood and the tire tracks from the contractor's truck. I explained the situation, showing him the county permit for the fence that I'd dug up from my files. He took notes, snapped a few photos, and said, "This sounds like a civil matter, but if the fence is part of a county mandate, there could be criminal charges for property damage. We'll need to talk to this current person." While the police did their thing, I started repairing the damage myself. I had some spare cedar planks in my garage from a previous project, and I spent the rest of the day hammering them into place, to at least close the gap temporarily. My neighbor Tom came over to help, shaking his head the whole time. "Karen's always been a piece of work, but this is next level," he said. "You know, she tried to find me for having a birdhouse that was too colorful." I laughed, despite myself. "She's got a real talent for making enemies." The next day, Linda from the county showed up with a wildlife biologist named Dr. Patel. They inspected the fence and the reserve. Taking notes and photos, Dr. Patel was particularly concerned about a pair of nesting owls in the reserve that could be disturbed by the breach. "This is serious," he said. "The county could pursue fines or even criminal charges if endangered species are impacted. Whoever did this didn't just damage your property, they put a protected ecosystem at risk." That evening, I got a call from Officer Daniels. "We spoke to Ms. Mitchell," he said. "She admitted to ordering the fence cut down, but claims it was within her rights as an HOA officer. She's sticking to her story about the notice, but she couldn't produce a copy. We've issued her a citation for vandalism, and the county's environmental department is taking over from here." I felt a flicker of satisfaction, but I knew this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to back down. Sure enough, the next HOA meeting was a circus. Karen stood at the front of the community center, clutching her clipboard like a shield, and launched into a tirade about how my fence was lowering property values and ruining the neighborhood's aesthetic. She even had the audacity to present a slideshow of approved fence designs, none of which matched the wildlife barrier specifications. I stood up and laid out the facts. The fence was county mandated, approved by the HOA when it was built, and her actions had violated both HOA bylaws and county law. I showed the photos of the damage, the county permit, and a letter from Dr. Patel outlining the ecological risks. The room went silent. Even Karen's usual supporters, her little clique of busybodies, looked uncomfortable. The HOA president, a mild-mannered guy named Greg, cleared his throat. "Karen, did you get board approval before taking action?" Karen's face turned red. "I acted in the best interest of the community," she said. "The bylaws give me authority to enforce standards, not to destroy private property." I shot back, "and not to break county law." The meeting ended with Greg promising to review the matter, but the tide was turning. Word had spread about Karen's stunt, and neighbors were starting to share their own stories of her overreach. One woman complained about a $200 fine for planting tulips that weren't on the approved flower list. Another guy said Karen had threatened to tow his car because it had a small dent. The community was fed up. A week later, things escalated. Linda from the county called me with an update. "We've issued a cease and desist order to your HOA and Ms. Mitchell personally," she said. "The damage to the wildlife barrier could result in fines up to $10,000, and we're considering criminal charges for environmental violations. We've also notified the state's Department of Fish and Wildlife." I was stunned. I'd expected a slap on the wrist, maybe a fine, but this was serious. Apparently, a jogger had spotted a dog chasing a rabbit near the breached fence, and a local wildlife group had raised hell about it. The county wasn't messing around. Karen, of course, didn't take it well. I heard from Tom that she'd been going door to door, trying to rally support and claiming I was attacking her character.